So I'm going to break these down. I'm going to cut this into a roast we're going to put on the rotisserie. And this end, I'm going to make some cowboy steaks for you to grill.
Perfect. Bone in.
And then I'm going to break this down into about 13 ribeyes, about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches thick.
Perfect.
That you're going to cook 7 different ways for us. And then we're going to do the tomahawk. So.
Okay. We've got some porterhouses here as well.
Yeah, poor porterhouses. These bad boys weigh 2 pounds a piece. I looked at the invoice. You want to know?
No, I don't want to know.
Six, okay.
Nope.
$60 steak.
I don't want to know.
That's a $60 steak. There's no shame in this.
Yeah, but
this is a couple $100. And those, you can get those at Sam's Club or at a specialty meat market. And so those are about $15 to $18 a pound. It's just showing you're paying for the bone.
All this marbleization in here,
yeah.
You want it to look like a downtown Dallas. Little streets everywhere.
Yeah.
You don't want it to look like Azle. There's one road out here. If it
hey,
looks like that,
sticks, you bastard.
Don't buy it.
Okay.
You want it to look like downtown Dallas.
People see that and they think, oh, look at all the fat. Look at that.
Fat's flavor.
Fat is flavor. That's where all the good stuff is. And it's going to marinate all that meat. This will just melt in your mouth. So I can't
There's a lot of natural sweetness in that fat, so it's just going to enhance the beef flavor even more.
A lot of people don't see all of the fat in these cuts. Once I start to break this down, they're going to see something that they normally don't. When you're buying it at the butcher store, these are trimmed beautifully. You don't have to do anything. These are the primals, so these haven't been trimmed at all by the butcher. So I'm going to show off my butchery skills for you.
Do I need to get the medical kit?
No. Yeah, you're the one that always cuts yourself.
All right.
These are beautiful, so we're going to pack these away into the cooler for you.
All right, well, good luck.
Take your steaks and go. This is a 28-day wet-aged prime rib. It's certified Angus beef. It has the bones in. Sometimes when you see the whole primal, they'll take the bones out. The butcher will cut those out. This is a bone in. Usually it's less expensive because this is usually a couple dollars less per pound because the bones are in there. When they take the bones out, the butcher charges more. So I like the bones in. We're going to roast a part of this today on a rotisserie spit. It's a long cook time, so we're going to start early. It's going to take about 5 hours to do this. So it'll be a beautiful roast if you're doing this for company. A lot of times people will do this for Christmas. This is kind of a, like turkey is for Thanksgiving. This is, a great family holiday meal. In the restaurant terms, they call it a cowboy steak, where it's a bone-in ribeye, and it has a short piece of the bone still intact. And so the first thing I'm going to do is square up the end of the primal here. You can see it's kind of at a wedge. And so to slice it down, people look for this in competition. It's kind of like the doorstop or the wedge, but it just gets a clean cut on the outside surface. And again, you can see the beautiful marbling that's like, the cook's prerogative. You put this on the grill once it warms up and season that, and it's already falling apart. When something's that tender to begin with, but taking that off the end, you're able to see just the beautiful marbling within the steak. And so no bone saw. So I'm going to try to ride between the outer bone, and it just cuts like butter and gets prettier as we go in. You can see the beautiful marbling inside the muscle. It's important, being inside the muscle because it marinates the meat when it's cooking, and it emulsifies the flavor. And, if the fat's on the outside, it's kind of like some people gain fat on the outer parts. The fat inside the muscle is kind of the most desirable part. So it just makes the meat tender. So a butcher then would trim away, I call this the tail piece, but it's a big chunk of fat that runs from about here all the way to the tip of the bone. And so I'm going to trim that away and go down to the bone and then come back across. This would be stew meat or hamburger. If you have a dog, they'll love you. And then this is the bone, the cowboy. So it's kind of the cousin of the tomahawk, except not so much bone. And these are actually easier to grill because a tomahawk, the bone, there's a lot of marrow in it, and the marrow is fat, and so it catches on fire real easy. Or you can be the caveman. So that's kind of the cowboy steak you want to cut and go all the way down to the bone to clean it up. It gives it a prettier appearance. But again, it's all show. Cooking the whole rib, the reason they leave those on there, when you cook the whole rib, it's kind of Mother Nature's meat rack. You can see this, and they're bowed. So you'll trim down into this, and then when you roast it up like this. And so the bones act as a shelf, and so it holds the meat. It's kind of a resting rack. So that's why they leave the bone in on this kind of meat, because it's kind of functional. So when you're roasting it, it provides a base to cook the meat. So I'm going to clean up this end a little bit because I want more snacks for later. And look at the marbling on these pieces. In a butcher shop, this would end up in the hamburger. So it's good to know a butcher. You can get this hamburger versus the other. So I'm going to get one more bone in. It's easier to visualize the bones cutting this way. If I started to cut right here, you could see bone. If I had a bone saw or a bandsaw, they measure the thickness and just run through at the grocery store. So bone-in ribeyes are typically a little bit less than boneless. But I think these are a good thickness, beautiful marbling. And again, when I'm slicing these, I'm being mindful to have a uniform thickness, because if it's too wide on one side and narrower on the other side, they won't cook even. So this would be more well done. This would be less done. So again, we're going to make this a cowboy steak. So I'm going to cut all the way down to the muscle or the bone, and then use a paring knife to fillet away this piece. And again, they call this stew meat. If there's a lot of meat, the meat around the rib bones is more tender because it's a muscle, but it's not load bearing. Leg muscles, they hold up 1,000-pound cow out all day long. And this meat in between the ribs is so tender. So clean that down to the bone and do a little more. So again, this is fun for the chef. We'll show you a few tips later on how to cook this part of the meat. This would normally end up in the hamburger bin. And these chunks of fat, lard, if you render this down, you'll have lard. I like putting this in a skillet and slowly melt this down. And then the fat that renders from that, I'll grill onions, mushrooms. It makes for a neat side. So you don't have to waste that. So you could render that down, feed this to the dog, save this part for yourself. Then these are the very showy cowboy ribeyes. This outer fat, we could trim that down a little more. Sometimes it's a silver skin, and like this, that you'd want to trim away just to have a good bite. So I'm going to trim just along the edges there a little bit. Yeah, so when the butcher's putting this in the case for $20 a pound, they're going to make it look as pretty as possible. So this is just beautiful. And look how tender that is. It's already falling off the bone, literally. So that's going to be great. So we try not to waste anything. We can render this, eat that for later, and keep the dog happy. So this part now is going to be what we put on the rotisserie. It's going to cook for about 5 hours, and we're going to roast this whole, and it's going to be beautiful later. So the next primal that I'm going to do is we're just going to cut it all into steaks. It's a lot easier when the bones have been taken out. Literally, it's just slicing the steaks. But it's a good anatomy lesson because I'm going to lay out all of the steaks from one end to the other, and you can see how the muscle changes as it gets further down the primal. So stay tuned.